Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So it was revealed yesterday that HMRC are investigating one of Farage's closest allies, Posh George as he's known, someone Farage has described as being like a son to him. He is, as befits someone at the heart of Reform UK, someone who is filthy rich from a very privileged background but goes out of his way to avoid paying tax in Britain by pretending to live somewhere else. In other words, another fake patriot. But what exactly are HMRC investigating him for? And will they ask Farage who paid for his house while they're at it? But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So Posh George, more officially known as George Cotterill. But imagine that, is called Posh George amongst his crowd. His crowd includes people like Nigel Farage, people who have a very privileged background, multimillionaires. So just think, how posh do you have to be called Posh George by other people who by any standards are also very posh? But anyway, he's someone who's been extremely close to Nigel Farage for years. I mean, extremely close to the point where, as I say, Farage, who famously denies all sorts of associations, is more than happy to admit he has a very close relationship with George Cotterill, right? He's an aristocrat, but lives in tax exile, at least on paper, so isn't interested in doing his best for his country. Filthy rich, very expensive home in London, because even though he doesn't want to pay tax here, he still enjoys taking advantage of its trappings. He's also apparently writing a book called How to Launder Money, although we are assured the book itself is a lot more innocent than the title suggests. But why are HMRC sniffing around? Has he been a naughty boy? Well, he has been convicted of financial naughtiness in the United States, and this may be partly the reason for the investigation now. The report suggests that HMRC are likely to have been alerted to large sums of money moving into and out of his bank accounts, which is usually a sign of illegal behaviour, although in Posh George's case, it might actually just be stupid behaviour. He is known to get involved in large-scale gambling, like big gambling. And it's this which he blames for his prior convictions for money laundering, wire fraud, blackmail and extortion. I mean, imagine Morgan McSweeney, instead of just not submitting tax returns a couple of times, let's say he had a rap sheet like that. He'd be kicked out of Downing Street before you could say thank goodness he's gone. So that Farage even gets away with openly getting political advice, because this man is not just a friend of Nigel Farage's. Farage is open. This is a man who gives him a lot of political advice. So he's a senior advisor for Nigel Farage and has been for years. That he can openly get advice from such a man is another bit of actual two-tier journalism that benefits the croaky frog of doom. But there's more dodginess really, and it's related to this HMRC investigation. Now, maybe he is up to no good tax-wise, right? He is a grand-scale tax avoider, and it's always possible for such people to stray into tax evasion if they're not careful. But assuming he has been careful and HMRC ultimately find nothing illegal, that still raises a serious question. See, he claims it was his gambling addiction which was responsible for his various indiscretions a few years ago when he was convicted of, well, he was at least charged with 21 felonies. He was convicted for a fair number of them. But how serious does your gambling addiction have to get before you not only commit fraud, but blackmail and extortion as well? See, people sometimes think of certain types of fraud as having no victims. It's just the banks and they've got loads of money. So it bypasses their empathy controls. But blackmail and extortion are very aggressive crimes against very identifiable people. You know who you're extorting, you know who you're blackmailing. They've got a name, they've got a face. You cannot get that past an empathy feature in your brain. So back to the current investigation. So let's say HMRC discover that suspiciously large movements of money are nothing more than for the purposes of feeding his epic gambling habit. All perfectly legal. But that would mean his gambling habit is still excessive. And given that he specifically cited it as a reason for his very serious crimes for which he was convicted in America, even though he only actually spent a few months in prison because, well, I don't know, but I'm guessing because he's rich and well connected. So he specifically cites gambling addiction as the reason for these multiple felonies and said he would get help to address the problem. If it turns out the reason for this investigation is being shifting massive amounts of money about again, but for high stakes gambling, doesn't that mean he's still addicted, and so addicted that by his own admission is at risk of committing serious crimes such as fraud, blackmail, extortion, money laundering? And here's where there's surely an important question for the public, if we have any journalists left to ask them. Let's say HMRC clear him of wrongdoing because he's just gambling on an epic scale, but it's all legal, it's his money, right? Shouldn't we be concerned that someone with a history of extortion and blackmail is a very close advisor of someone who wants to run the country? Like, seriously, who imagines that even Boris Johnson would have gotten away with having such a dodgy close advisor? And no Labour leader ever would. Yet Farage can openly admit he's very close to a convicted extortionist with a dangerous gambling addiction that he describes as being like a son, and the media are cool with it. Most are. Some have made an issue, Byline Times most famously, but more should do so. I mean, a man whose gambling addiction can lead to them being so desperate as to attempt extortion and blackmail. Imagine what he might do if he was advising the government when he gets into another spot of bother over his gambling habit. It just invites grand-scale corruption of the sort which might make even Boris Johnson embarrassed. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind-the-scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.